All right, let's tackle a problem from the homework. I wanted to just start by pointing out the instructions for your homework assignment is 9 through 31 odd. So these are the instructions for all of those problems. So they say in all of these, test the claim, identify the null hypothesis, which we'll definitely want to do, and identify the alternative hypothesis. We definitely want to do that. Keep in mind we are not doing test statistic. So, right, anytime you see them ask for test statistic, you're ignoring that. We are doing the p-value. We are not doing the critical value. So you'll ignore all of that. But we also need the conclusion about the null hypothesis and the final conclusion that addresses the original claim. That's where we make a just normal, plain English language sentence that anybody can understand. It says use the p-value method unless your instructor specifies otherwise. Use the normal distribution. Yeah, we don't even need to think about this sentence right here. So you can ignore that too. StatDisk is going to take care of that part of the number crunching for us. Okay, so let me take a look at number 22. Okay, so this is one study. Smokers who tried to quit smoking with the nicotine patch. 39 of them were still smoking 1 year later, and 32 were not after 1 year. And they cite their source. Okay. Use the 0.05 significance level. That's the normal significance level. I'm just saying what's usual, what's unusual. Yeah, 5%. To test the claim that, okay, and here's the key phrase you are always wanting to start trying to find, is saying what is the actual claim. So test the claim that among smokers who are trying to quit with a nicotine patch therapy, the majority are smoking a year after the treatment. Most of the homework problems are going to give you an actual number, like 30% are still smoking or 80% are still smoking. The majority is one of the words that they expect that you understand. Majority means more than half. Not equal to half, more than half. So majority. So their claim there is about a proportion. And their claim is that the proportion is greater than 50%. And then they say, what do these results suggest? Okay, so let's do the hypothesis test and all that first. Okay, so identify the null and alternative hypotheses. So there's one claim. Without even thinking about what this is talking about, I can write down the other claim. Say greater than, less than, or equal to. So there's our null. Oh, sorry. We need to decide which one's which. This one has the equal sign. So that one's the null. This one does not have the equal sign, so that's the alternative. And now our next thing to do is to find the p-value, which means going to StatDisk. So before we go to StatDisk, let's make sure we have all the numbers that we need to punch into it. It's going to ask for the significance level. It's going to ask for the alternative hypothesis. We've got those. It is going to ask how many people were in this study. So keep in mind, P is still smoking. So 39 of them were still smoking. But 39 out of how many? How many people total were involved in this? There's 39 people there, another 32 people there. So 39 plus 32, 71. So there's actually, I guess, two little tricky things here. One, they didn't tell you the total number. They told you the two halves of the number. And I think the other thing that's a little bit tricky is their claim just said majority instead of more than 50%. But with that said, I think we're ready to go ahead and pull up StatDisk. So I'm going to say goodbye for a minute. And let's go to StatDisk and let's go to analysis and hypothesis testing proportions with one sample. Okay. So what's our alternative hypothesis here? The null is less than or equal to, the alternative is greater than. So here we want to say the population proportion is greater than the claimed proportion. Okay, our significance level is 5%. The claimed proportion is 50, right? That's what we're saying we're greater than. P greater than 50. So that claimed proportion they're looking for is always this number you should be writing down in your hypotheses. The sample size was 71. The number of successes meaning people that were still smoking, right? Whatever it is you're trying to measure. There were 39 people that were still smoking. And we are ready to evaluate. There's several numbers here. The only one we really need is the p-value, which is about 20%. I'll just go 3 sig figs, so 0.203, let's say. Again, you don't need to actually draw a curve for this. I'm not requiring that, but just to emphasize the idea. We put our normal curve at 50%. The sample came out greater than 50%, but not convincingly so. I said the sample was only about here. There's still about 20% of the curve that's even more extreme than that. So while it is a little bit higher than 50%, it's well within the normal range of sample variation, if the null is true. So because of that, okay, we've gotten null hypothesis, alternative hypothesis, we just got the p-value. The conclusion about the null hypothesis. And here our conclusion about the null hypothesis. As we're saying, this was not convincing enough. I can't reject the null. Certainly possible with a 50% rate to get a sample like ours. So don't reject the null. That is our conclusion about the null hypothesis. And up until this point, none of this would make sense to anybody outside of a stats class. So now we need to write our final sentence, final conclusion. So we're not rejecting the null. So we are saying I can't reject the null. And if it's easier, you can say, because these two are logical opposites, you can also say I can't support the alternative. I think I'm going to say it that way. I could say I cannot reject the null. I'm going to say I cannot support the alternative. So I'm going to say there is not evidence to support at the rate of people still smoking. After 1 year on the patch. So there's not evidence to support the alternative. This rate, there's not evidence to support the rate of people still smoking after 1 year on the patch. is more than 50%. If we had rejected the null, we would have said there is evidence to support that the rate of people still smoking after 1 year on the patch is more than 50%. But we could not reject the null, so we just said, hey, there's no evidence for the alternative. All right, there's lots of ways to write correct sentences about these. The ones in the back of the book are correct, but they're not the only correct sentence. So be careful to check your sentence against the back of the book and make sure it's equivalent at least to what they're saying if it's not exactly the same. Definitely make sure your p-values are the same and your null and alternative hypotheses are the same. All right, I'll let you tackle this homework, and in section 8.4 we'll go on to test claims about means. So you'll get another shot at practicing all of this.